Don't you dare call out for help, Will whispers, gripping Tia's shoulder and digging in with his nails. Tia whimpers in pain but can't even bring herself to fight back. She's paralyzed in fear of what Will might do. You're mentally ill, Will hisses in Tia's ear, and you need my help. Will shoves Tia back against the locker. The metallic thud of her body hitting the metal can barely be heard over the sound of the other kids. Take your clothes off, Will demands, shoving her again, but this time harder. Unable to hold her head up, Tia almost goes limp. Tears streaming from her eyes, and she can only wish that someone cared enough to help. She doesn't hold any hope. No one ever defends her. You're gonna walk these corridors naked, Tony, Will says. Then we'll all see what gender you really are. Tia's chest becomes unbearably tight. She can barely breathe as she begins to hyperventilate. His words strike fear into her soul. She'd never live that down, and her life wouldn't be worth living. Around them at that moment, as Will starts pulling at Tia's clothes to remove them, laughter can be heard all around them. The other kids in the corridor are cheering and shouting so loud. Will assumes it's in reaction to him. He thinks they are all laughing in response to what he's going to make Tia do. Tia also assumes the same as she loses hope and gives up. However, what she doesn't know is that the laughter from the other students isn't aimed at her. The laughter gets louder and louder, and that only shuts Tia down more. As Will becomes even more brash and confident, he yanks at Tia's clothes, forcibly trying to remove them. Everyone else agrees with me, Will jibes, not knowing what's happening around him as the sound of running echoes between the corridor walls. Just as Tia thinks about falling into a ball on the floor, hoping she'd die, that sound of kids running instantly stops, and so does the laughter. There's a moment of somewhat silence. It's almost like everyone is fixated. Tia? A familiar voice says over the commotion, panting like they are out of breath. Rain, come on! Another voice shouts desperately. If they catch us, they'll know it was us. Expecting Rain to keep running away, Heath is surprised as Rain roughly grabs his collar and stops him from running past. They stand directly behind Will, abandoning their escape from another master prank. Like a beam of sunshine breaking through the darkest of storm clouds, Tia knows exactly who those voices belong to. It's Heath and Rain. All the kids around them scream out for Rain and Heath to keep running, but they don't. Wait, Rain says, her voice serious and stern. What's going on here, Tia? Will looks back over his shoulder to see Heath and Rain glaring at him. Usually happy-go-lucky types, Heath's and Rain's sour expressions are a real indication of how pissed off they are. Fuck off, Will snorts, gesturing with his hand for them to move as he continues to hold Tia. How about you fuck off? Heath retorts angrily, slapping his hand down onto Will's shoulder. Gripping his hand tight, Heath digs his fingers into Will's shoulder, copying what he sees him doing to poor Tia. Will lets go of Tia and allows her to drop to her knees. Tia is almost lifeless. If it wasn't for her obvious panicked breathing, she'd look like she's dead. Tia! Rain shrieks in reaction. Turning on a dime, Will palms Heath's hand from his shoulder and shoves him backwards. Having to hold a sizable white tube of glue in his other hand, Heath isn't able to block. Fuck off, I said, Will repeats. This is between me and this little freak. It's nothing to do with you chumps. A fire burns in Rain's heart. She looks down at Tia, whimpering and shivering, and something in her snaps. Nothing is going to stop her from defending Tia right now. Not even the chance of getting caught red-handed by the teacher they've pranked. Not holding back, Rain shoves Will hard, causing him to step back to catch his balance. What did you do? Rain growls and spits through gritted teeth. If you've hurt her, I'm going to cave your head in. Will laughs and points in Rain's direction. Are you now? Is your boyfriend here going to do the fighting? Because all I see is a little angry lady. Throwing Heath a sideways smirk, Will mocks Rain by pretending to be scared of her. What's your girlfriend going to do to me? Tickle me to death with those girly little arms? Heath chuckles to himself. You've done it now, dude, he answers, shrugging his shoulders. Rain steps forward and brushes her hair from her eyes. Making herself as big as possible, she squares up to Will, but finds herself having to look up at him. Oh, scary, Will mocks. Rain puts a single finger in front of Will's face and stares him directly in the eyes. "Leave her alone. You understand?" Rolling his eyes, Will chuckles and doesn't take Rain's demands seriously. Adjusting his stance, he throws back one arm to shove Rain to the floor, therefore ending her pointless attempts to intimidate him. As he thrusts his arm, knowing he'd be able to throw her to the floor with ease, he's left speechless as Rain quickly deflects. There's a smug look on her face, and as his arm falls aimlessly to his side, it makes him even more determined to strike her down. Again, he shoves. Again, she deflects with ease. He tries again. Rain palms him away. As this is all happening, Heath quietly moves slowly behind Will, seeing his chance to do so. Rain catches a quick smile from Heath as she looks over Will's shoulder, and she knows exactly what he's thinking. Frustrated and angry, Will's attempts to hit Rain get more and more aggressive. He swings and swings, trying his best now to punch Rain as hard as he can. No longer does he want to push her away. He wants to teach her a lesson. He doesn't care if he's hitting a girl. No one makes him look like a fool. "I'm going to kill you all!" Will shouts, bracing himself to tackle Rain to the floor. Having grown up with brothers, Rain is all too versed in roughhousing. As Will looks like he's about to dive at her, she puts all her might into a single shove. Hitting him hard and directly in the chest, she grunts as his large frame is hard to move. Not expecting so much might from a little lady, Will is left bemused as he's pushed back and something is behind him at his feet. Unable to step back and stop himself from falling, Will's large frame tumbles to the floor, falling right over Heath, who's kneeling directly behind him on the floor. Laughing like a school child, Heath's giggling is only drowned out by the sound of Will's back slamming down against the hard concrete floor. He hits the ground and a squish sound echoes off the walls. "Jerk!" Rain spits in Will's direction before kneeling down to help Tia. Angered, Will's blood boils. The rage inside him blinds him to the fact that Heath has covered the floor with the glue that he held in his hands. Will's t-shirt is glued stuck to the floor with the extra strength glue Rain and Heath have stolen from the janitor's cupboard. Heath gets to his feet and wipes the excess glue down his front. Standing over Will triumphantly, who's trying desperately to get to his feet, he smirks. "Do you now know how it feels to be a turtle, dude?" Heath asks, watching Will flailing around on the floor. "I'd help you, but you were clearly being nasty to our friend." "Why can't I get up?" Will screams, trying to kick Heath as he stands over him. Jumping back, unable to hold in the laughter, Heath almost kicks over the tub of glue. "Whoa, dude, easy. You almost got me there." Tia opens her eyes to see Rain looking down at her. She can't believe someone actually helped her. It's like those tear-filled prayers of hers are finally being answered. "Stand up," Rain says softly, grabbing at Tia's arm. "Thank you," Tia sobs, unable to hold back her emotions. I was so scared." Tia buries her head straight into Rain's chest. She lets out all her emotions and breaks down into tears. A little awkward, Rain looks at Heath and they share a soft smile between them, like a mother and father reacting to their own child. "Thank you." Tia howls, crying so much that her tears are getting Rain's dress wet. "It's okay," Rain replies, bringing her arms around Tia to comfort her. "Aw, cute," Heath teases, but quickly turns serious. "Rain, we need to get out of here. Right now." "No." Rain holds Tia tighter, giving Heath a stern look. Heath listens to the sound of Tia crying, and suddenly, their prank seems unimportant. "Sure, I understand," Heath replies, accepting his fate. He then gulps back hard, and his voice cracks. Here comes Mrs. Constant. She doesn't look happy." Rain looks back over her shoulder, but continues to embrace the tearful Tia. She sees Mrs. Constant steamrolling towards them. "Oh, shit," Rain sighs, turning to give Heath a defeated glance. "Yup," Heath replies, letting out a long breath. "They've caught us red-handed with the glue. No way we're talking ourselves out of this one." "Heath!" Miss Constant booms, silencing any chatter still remaining around them. "Rain, stop right there!" "Miss!" Will cries out from the floor, throwing his arms up for attention. "They've stuck me to the floor, miss! Rain, Heath, and Tony are all bullies!" "Tia," Heath corrects, kicking Will's foot. You dumbass. Mrs. Constant stops and stands over the scene. To her left is Tia crying uncontrollably in Rain's arms, and to her right is Will wildly flopping around on the floor as Heath looks over him. Get up, William, Mrs. Constant commands, rubbing her eyes. Stop making such a fuss, young man. You're acting like a child. I can't, Will answers. They put that glue down and stuck me to the floor. Heath nervously laughs and tries his best to kick the glue tub out of sight, but Mrs. Constant sees him and frowns hard. Oh, Heath, she says, shaking her head with disappointment. Tia looks up from Rain's arms and is about to explain what happened, but Mrs. Constant is in no mood to listen. Having lowered her head in frustration, Mrs. Constant clicks her fingers and points towards her office at the far end of the corridor. Heath? Rain, she says sternly. My office. Now! Gently letting Tia go, Rain gives her a reassuring smile. Tia wants to protest Heath and Rain's innocence, but after wiping the tears from her eyes, she's too late. Get up, boy, Mrs. Constant grumbles, helping Will up from the floor. Grabbing one of his hands, the larger-than-life woman yanks him from the floor, causing his t-shirt to tear. Will tries his best to hide his modesty, but it's no use as half the t-shirt is stuck to the floor. Nice chest, Will, Rain smirks. Shut it, Will hisses in reply. You, Mrs. Constant orders, looking down at Will. You're coming to the office too. I want to understand what just happened. Miss, Tia says meekly, holding up a single hand to catch her attention. It's not what you think. It is what I think, Mrs. Constant interrupts rudely, reaching down to pick up the tub of glue. These two, she shoots a sour look in Rain and Heath's directions, have smothered this glue all over the principal's private bathroom. He's very upset, and they are in a lot of trouble. Shaking her head, Tia can't believe it. However, looking at Rain's guilty expression, she knows it's likely true. Why else would they have the glue? Are we going to get expelled? Rain asks, almost having accepted her fate. That is not for me to decide, Mrs. Constant answers honestly. Now all of you, march! Not allowing any of them to say a further word, Mrs. Constant snaps a sharp look at all of them, including Tia, and they all do as they are told. Heath and Rain, although upset they've been caught, neither of them look that upset. They walk proud. However, Tia feels as small as a mouse. If it wasn't for her, they probably would have got away with it. If they hadn't come to her in aid, neither of them would be in trouble. Heath? Tia whispers as quietly as she can as they march towards Mrs. Constant's office. Heath turns to look and smiles. You okay? I'm sorry, Tia mouths. Heath slowly blinks, and as his eyes open, he gives Tia the widest grin. Worth it, he mouths, quickly glancing in Will's direction as he follows behind them. Heath then giggles, mimicking how Will flailed around on the floor. Tia covers her mouth and lets out a single laugh. Mrs. Constant looks back with the sharpest of glares. Tia looks sheepishly away and goes bright red. The rest of lunch is not a bed of roses. Tia, Heath, and Rain are split up as Mrs. Constant talks to Will. Eventually, Will appears from her office and walks past Tia, who sits all alone, waiting for Mrs. Constant to call her. Your loser friends are so getting expelled, Tony, Will jibes, still upset that he was made to look a fool. Mrs. Constant is in her office right now with the principal, and I can tell you already they are totally toast. Looking chuffed with himself and rather smug, Will leans against the wall and over Tia as she sits. Strange how it's those two getting expelled. I always thought I'd be the one going first. Will claps his hands together. Oh well, it's not like I care. Turning his back to Tia, Will stops. Looking back over his shoulder, he smiles. See you in class, Tony. Tia says nothing in reply. All she can think is that she shouldn't have stood up for herself. Will walks away and leaves Tia drowning in guilt. She sinks in her chair and brings her knees to her chest. Tia thinks about how long she's been wanting just one friend. Now the only two people who talk to her are about to get kicked out of school. All those negative thoughts swirl around her and she sinks further and further into despair. As the tears well up in her eyes, Tia thinks about the fun she had yesterday, and knew it was too good to be true. Her dysphoria begins to kick in like she's never felt before. Her transition seems meaningless. Her life seems pointless. However, just as she begins to give in to her own demons, the image of Rain and Heath smiling at her brings her comfort. That's when it occurs to her. Those two need saving. They need saving just as she did. Getting to her feet, Tia rubs her sore eyes and focuses on what she needs to do. No more Mrs. Nice Tia. It's time to kick some ass. For her friends. Marching towards Mrs. Constant's office, the tears in her eyes continue to roll down her cheeks, but she's not going to let that stop her. Taking a long breath as she stands at Mrs. Constant's office door, she pushes it open. As Tia bursts into the room, she sees the principal and Mrs. Constant standing over Heath and Rain, who sit in front of her desk. They all turn to look at her, making her feel incredibly nervous. However, Tia is steadfast in her resolve. Her new friends need saving. "They rescued me!" Tia shrieks, shocking the room with her outburst. "Tia?" Mrs. Constant laughs nervously, looking at how shocked the principal is by the interruption. "Please, dear, we are having a private meeting?" Rain rests one arm on the back of her chair as she looks at Tia in the doorway and gives her encouragement. "You go, girl." Emboldened by her friend, Tia shakes her head and steps further into the room, making herself as big as possible. Tia points at Heath and Rain in front of her. "These two saved me today," she explains, determined to shine a light on the truth. "Will was going to strip me naked and make me parade around the school. If it wasn't for these two, I... Tia begins to weep as the pain is still so fresh in her mind. "He was going to what?" Mrs. Constant asks bluntly. "Make me walk naked." Tia sobs her heart out. "He's a bully." "Is this true, Tia?" Yes." Tia whines out in agony, allowing herself to expel all the hidden pains that Will has been inflicting on her over the last few months. Mrs. Constant rubs her face in exhaustion and shares a quick, telling glance with the principal, who stands awkwardly. "Is this true?" she asks Heath and Rain. "Was Will doing those things?" Heath and Rain look at each other for a moment before turning to look at Tia in shock. "Was he really trying to make you do that, Tia?" Rain asks, deeply upset at what she's just heard. Tia can't bring herself to answer. She's desperately upset, so the only thing she can do is not. "My God," Heath says, rustling his hair. "Well, he totally deserved it then." Rain agrees with a vigorous nod. "Miss," Rain looks up at the teachers with an earnest expression. "If you're going to kick us out of school, please look after Tia. That dope Will seems to have it out for her." "I thought you had this under your control, Emily." The principal speaks up, pushing his glasses up his nose. Turning to face the principal, Emily sighs. "I thought I did. I wasn't aware young Tia was potentially being bullied." "Why didn't you say anything?" Mrs. Constant asks. "I told you I'd look out for you. Do you not trust me enough? I know that William boy gives you grief. Some of the other kids have told me. Why didn't you tell me that it was this bad?" Tia doesn't know what to say. She didn't want to bother anyone, so she thought it would be easier to keep it to herself and hope he stops on his own. "Seriously?" Rain speaks up, looking back again. "You shouldn't put up with that, Tia. Why didn't you tell me and Heath yesterday that he's giving you a hard time?" Tia starts backing away and towards the door. She doesn't want them to question it. She just wants her friends to stay. "We're getting off subject," the principal interjects. "We can deal with that another time. Right now, what I want to understand is what's driven our two brightest students to act in such toilet terrorism." "Nigel," Emily laughs dismissively. "They put super glue on your toilet seat. Hardly terrorism." Nigel snaps a disapproving look. "Tell that to my backside." Rubbing his pants once again, the principal grits his teeth like he's mildly in pain. "It's the final straw. I want them both expelled." "No!" Tia screams, causing everyone to go silent. "You can't!" "Young lady," Nigel scolds. "Don't raise your voice like that." "You can't!" Tia screams some more. "They are my friends." Tia's anguish is evident as she mutters, "They are my only friends." A tear dribbles from Rain's eye as Tia lays true feelings bare for everyone to see. Heath just stares in shock, not knowing what to say. Emily lets out another exhausted breath and relegates herself to her seat. Rubbing her eyes, she looks at Nigel with a serious look on her face. "It's your call, Nigel," she says. "Personally, I want to thank these two for looking out for Tia." "Aw, thanks, Emily." Rain teases Mrs. Constant with a wink. "Don't push it, young lady," Mrs. Constant replies with a disapproving eyebrow in her direction. The silence is then deafening as they all turn to Nigel, awaiting his decision. He looks at all of them one by one. Heath and Rain have the cheekiest smirks on their faces. He knows they did it, and he'd like nothing but to wipe those silly looks from their faces. However, Nigel looks at Tia, and she somewhat reminds him of his own daughter. Although his backside hurts, all humans, even the principal, understand the desire for friendship. Nigel lifts up his specs and rubs one eye. "Fine," he sighs. Lowering his glasses back onto his nose, he looks over them and glares in Heath's and Rain's direction. "Last warning," he says bluntly. "Behave yourselves or you're out. Do you understand? One last prank and you two will be cleaning toilets in McDonald's before you know it." Like the pair of bobbleheads, Heath and Rain just nod several times in agreement before looking at Tia with the brightest smiles. "Thanks, club leader," Heath beams, fist-bumping Rain. "Thanks, new bestie," Rain follows up. "Wait," Heath glares at Rain before he sarcastically asks, "Does that mean I'm not your best friend anymore if Tia is?" "Your mom," Rain answers, not dignifying it with a real answer. Awash with emotions, Tia throws her arms around them both, making everyone in the room a little uncomfortable. However, Tia doesn't care. She's just incredibly grateful her new friends get to stay.